We are in a very odd situation within the United States. We literally have one state, Texas, who's legally in the middle of an invasion, yet the federal government, the United States, is saying, no, you're not. And you have the state of Texas who is trying to fortify their borders by utilizing razor wire to help fill the gaps in certain parts of Texas to deter or keep migrants away from entering the state. But on the flip side of things, and I'm sure you heard this, the federal government won a court case on the Supreme Court level to remove razor wire from the state of Texas. And to totally escalate the entire situation, you have a lot of states who are willing to send their actual National Guard soldiers and equipment to help Texas fortify their state and stop the migration of many migrants trying to come into the country. So we have a lot of different storylines and narratives here, and it's making things really confusing because in one sense, Texas is trying to defend their own state from the mass amount of migrants coming into their state, but they're also in this massive legal battle with the federal government on what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Oh, and I also should mention the fact that there is a civilian convoy heading towards the state of Texas to stand with Texas and show their support, again, for the state of Texas and Greg Abbott, the governor. So stick with me in this video because if you are from the United States, again, recognize this. You have a portion of your country, Texas, that is literally being invaded by state law currently. But real quick, as you know, I don't have any sponsors on this channel. So please like or at least comment or turn on the notifications, interact with this video, leave your opinions because it allows you to get the news whenever I post more videos. So thank you so much for your support. Let's get into this. Now, I'm going to read you this quote just to give you an idea of how far Texas has escalated things and how they are not budging away from the federal government. Texas is standing their ground, and Texas is saying, we are literally being invaded. We are putting up wire. Everywhere we can, we will continue. We will not stop. If they cut it, we will replace it. This is a quote from the Lieutenant Governor of Texas. So you need to understand that the state of Texas is highly unified when it comes to protecting their own state, on the top government level of the state and also on their localized forces, the National Guard and other state security services. Texas has been extremely proactive in ensuring that they will have complete control of their state if cartel members try to come into their state or illegal immigrants try to come into their state. Texas already passed a law that cartel members, they are deemed on the terror list. Texas also already took the initiative that any police officer or any law enforcement can arrest an illegal citizen within their state. So look, Texas already knew where they were going when it came to the federal government absolutely not agreeing with Texas, and Texas also brought it to a completely new level where they put into law that they are being invaded. And the Texas justification has been, well look, the federal government has been avoiding us, they haven't been helping us, and it is the constitutional right for the federal government to protect Texas in any sort of military manner or security services, and since the federal government is not doing that, this is how Texas has justified everything they are doing by utilizing their National Guard to beef up their security but give more rights to the National Guard. Now, what I find rather crazy, because I'm a total combat engineer nerd and history nerd, and I'm probably the only person on the internet to go viral talking about razor wire, is that they are fighting over razor wire. Now, the reason why I find this so fascinating is because razor wire, yes, it is effective, but of anything you could pick a fight with between Texas and the federal government, you chose the one thing that's supposed to be a passive measure, not to necessarily hurt the migrants, but a migrant should see razor wire and just avoid it. The federal government's justification for removing razor wire as it stands with the Supreme Court is that it's getting in the way of Homeland Security and other federal officials. And I've already talked about this before. It's been proven since World War I. You can literally just put plywood over razor wire and walk over it. You can also have an okay pair of gloves and remove the razor wire by your hand. So this was quite a stretch from the federal government to say it's getting in our way, we can't do our job. What it's really come down to is that the National Guard was able to localize their forces in an area known as Shelby Park in the town of Eagle Pass. And because of this, you have this standoff between federal agents and the National Guard, but this has escalated on the absolute federal level and the world stage of, hold on, are we in the middle of a civil war? And why now all of a sudden do we have a ton of states and governors who are willing to stand with Texas in case the federal government does something they might regret? Now, I did some digging and some research when it comes to the actual Constitution or the laws of what the federal government can do when it comes to Texas. You have something called your supremacy laws, and this is where the clash is coming between Texas and the federal government. Again, there was a Supreme Court case where the federal government won the case that they can remove razor wire in any location of Texas as long as it was emplaced by the state of Texas. And because we have what are called supremacy laws, the federal government will always have the jurisdictions over the states when it comes to the overall laws. And we are in a very odd situation where, again, Texas knows the federal government ultimately has jurisdiction, especially when it comes to laws and removing the razor wire specifically. But again, we find ourselves in an odd situation where Texas straight up says, if you take the wire away from us, we'll just put in more razor wire. We don't care. Now, I gotta be honest with you, I've been covering the Lone Star mission for quite a while now, about 2 years. And the media right now is really hyping up this situation between Texas and the federal government, where the narrative is pointing in the direction of, are we in a civil war right now, or are we heading in this direction? But the reason why this narrative can be a little problematic is because Joe Biden has finally acknowledged the fact that there is an issue, and he wants the federal government, Congress, Senate, to enforce a law or create a law where there is a cap of how many migrants can come into the country. Now, one thing I should point out is that it's very wishful thinking for Joe Biden to ask the government to put together a law or some sort of compromise to work together to protect the state of Texas and the United States when it comes to the mass amount of illegal immigrants coming into the country. This is because, again, if you are unaware, there is a Ukrainian aid package that nobody can agree on, and for some reason, this package is being tied together with the border issues. And because of this, again, there seems to be a standoff within government to see whether or not Donald Trump might get elected, and to see, if he gets elected, then we will fix the border. We're in this weird standoff, and we're in this weird thing where government is not willing to come together to just at least focus on the border. There always seems to be Ukrainian aid package tied in with the border or some sort of other issues tied with the border, and that gets all put in together. But right now, as it stands, it doesn't look like any federal agents or federal government entities have even attempted to try and steal away razor wire from Texas. The federal government is in a very odd position because they do have the jurisdiction and the right to remove whatever razor wire they want. However, there is a known fact that there are a ton of other governors out there who are willing, again, to fill the gaps with their own materials and equipment, razor wire, within Texas. And so, look, I wouldn't call this a civil war, but I would definitely call this defiance against the federal government. You can identify that or call it whatever you want, but it's an extremely bad look for the Biden administration or this current administration to have a bunch of governors and local state militias, also known as your National Guard members, start to employ or deploy their own equipment and troops into Texas when that's not even their jurisdiction. They're just doing it to get back at the federal government. And again, I am not calling this a civil war, but it definitely looks like one if we get to that level. And to make things even more complex or interesting is you have a group of people known as God's Army. Essentially, God's Army is a civilian element, or the group I was talking about at the beginning of the video, where they want to have a caravan make it all the way to Shelby Park or Eagle Pass, Texas. And Shelby Park, or Eagle Pass, this is where the National Guard right now essentially started to employ their state right as a National Guard element to defend their state from an invasion. Now, this God's Army caravan, what I'm seeing in my research is they're just trying to essentially show the United States what exactly is going on and show that, civilians or citizens, they really do care about the country, and they're just trying to show up to stand in solidarity with Texas. Now, I also should mention that their rally cry or their slogan is "Take back our border." Now, of course, depending where you stand politically, whether Republican or Democrat, when you see a slogan like "Take our border back," of course, that could imply a lot of different things. That could either be they're actually going to show up to the border and start working at the border, or it could be just them standing around and showing everybody we want to take back our border. So again, we'll see what happens. I don't want to speculate too hard. I'm just giving you a very general standpoint of who these people are and what exactly their motive is. At the time of making this video, again, apparently they want to make it to Washington, D.C. and travel along the coastline and officially end in Texas, Shelby Park or Eagle Pass. Point is, you're probably going to be seeing a lot of them in the news in the near future if you are following the story. So that is currently what's going on. Again, it's a weird feeling to know in the United States that we are technically being invaded over in Texas. Like, that is what Texas is legally saying. But according to the federal government, this is not true. This is not happening. So again, we are in an odd place right now as a country. I've talked to a lot of my friends who are stationed down in Texas, or some of them who live in Texas. And even for them, it's weird to be in a state where you are technically in the middle of a war. So yeah, that is what's going on in this country. Make sure to leave your comments and opinions down below, and we shall see what happens. I will keep you updated with any other facts or different narratives that are going on. But yeah, I do find it odd that we are all fighting over razor wire. That's a very weird thing to all fight over. I think we have other things we should sort of squash or work together in within Texas. But right now, we're in the middle of a razor wire war between Texas and the federal government.